Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. With the striped bass vote coming upon us and everything, everybody's in open arms. Yeah, there you see her, right? So that was a skin mount that was done several years ago. What I want to talk to you guys about is what you really don't know. And when I say what you don't know is I'm trying to give you a quick education about some things about the striped bass. Sure, it appears that everything is in full swing, great shape. And to some extent, I will agree with you. From the time I was surf fishing with my father in the early 70s to where you and I could go down to the surf this past spring, last fall for sure. And the big differences were maybe we caught a striped bass back in the 70s, 18 to 30 inches. And now they're 30, 40, 50 pounds in the fall run. And you're like, well, there you go. They're healthy. They're plentiful. Trollers, surf fishermen, everybody alike are really doing the number on these big fish. But the sheer problem really is the breeding stock. And that could be state to state, whatever you want to say, but the rules and regulations have stunk for quite some time. In the fact that if anybody in the government, NOAA fisheries, anybody listen to the educators of the world, they would understand that there is no breeding population per se that's more important than the 30 to 40 inch. Marine biologists, no matter what state, from Maine down to North Carolina, they all agree, and you can Google it, fact check it all you want. It's the 30 to 40 inch fish that are the mainstay of our population. And if you've been trolling in the last 10 years or surf fishing and such, man, we got a lot of big fish, 30, 40, 50, 60 pounders. Lots. And then we have a decent amount of like 23 to 25 pound fish. And then there's a bunch of small stuff, 5, 6, 7 pounds. Barely make our 28 to 30 inch, 31 inch slot limit here in Jersey. That is where the problem lies, that middle gap, right? So where's that middle gap? Where are we losing it from, or what have you? Well, I already posted on my regular Facebook page, like one of the big things just happened just 3 years ago. January 4th, 2022. Some of the fish that are in that video had tags, and they were tagged from Delaware, there was tags from Hudson, and there was tags from the Chesapeake. They're up in a bay in Nova Scotia, Cape Breton. Okay? Cold front came through, wicked cold. Dropped the digits down into near zero up there. And the bay was so shallow, it shocked the fish. The fish then come to the surface in shock because the water's shallow, they can't get deep. And then they got frostbite because their skin side that was up on the ocean front flash froze. Died, croaked. The guy that's in the video is a friend of mine, and you'll see that they weren't there half hour ago, 40 minutes ago. He was fishing for them. And now they were just washing up by the hundreds upon thousands, upon millions of pounds. And nothing was spared, from 18-inch fish to 40, 50-pound fish. So it does happen that there's big kills. They're rare, but it does happen. But I wanted to go and do some pinpointing. That's why I wrote a few things down here, so to help educate you all a little bit better. One of the biggest problems that we can see as a recreational fisherman is the lack of adult bunker this year. Just like last year, only it's even more so this year. A lack of big bunker, adult bunker, which, you know, the peanuts and the babies, when they spawn offshore, and the eggs come into the estuaries and rivers and such. And these fish actually stay here from 2 to 5 years before they're mature enough to go back out in the ocean where they needed to get the salinity back up in them to make their eggs fertile. Now you got Omega. He come from Canada. He come from the Gulf Coast. It doesn't matter or whatever. The payment for these permits are ridiculously low. For like less than $3,000, you can get 600 metric tons. I don't know how much is in a metric ton of adult bunker, but that's a junk load. A junk load at minimal dollars. So if we can maybe do what the Gulf did when they banned most netting in 1995 to 2000 for bait fish for commercial. Recreational, you were still allowed to get white baits, but a minimal amount. You were able to get shrimp and such, whatever. But when 5 years expired and 2000 came out, they had record numbers of grouper, snapper, better fishing than they ever had. Because you actually gave your baby fish and such a time to grow up and to become big fish and do what they needed to do to help populate. But here on the East Coast, Menhaden, all the way down to the Gulf Coast, is a much sought after bait fish. And it's mainly used for fertilizer, as we all know. However, as I was looking at notes, in 1990, roughly in the Gulf of Mexico, now the Gulf of America, and the Atlantic seaboard, we literally had between 550 and 600 metric tons each in each location. And then if you kind of come up in the numbers and Google 2000, they closed and banned the Menhaden in 2000 because there was none in the Atlantic. The Gulf, they had 231 metric tons. Previous year, almost 600 metric tons. Let's flash forward through now the I'd say 2010 to 2020. The Gulf, they continue to rake at 500 to 600 metric tons every single year. East Coast, 231, 226, 219. Less than half of what they originally were getting from years prior. And this is coming out of an established low of 2000. The numbers don't lie. But our officials, NOAA Fisheries, whoever, they're all ignoring facts. You can look them up. Anybody can look them up if they want. So, what I propose is all us fishermen get together. Because I was doing some crazy numbers on the registrations, saltwater permits that some of the states need, and saltwater licensing that some of the states have, where we're all fishing for striped bass, just striped bass. This goes from Maine, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New York, Jersey, Delaware, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and North Carolina. In 4 of those states, they're not counted. Saltwater registration permits or licensing. None of the information is available for the last 10 years. Government keeping it quiet, I don't know. But if you add up the other states that I just named, we have literally 2 million people that sign up for saltwater. What does that mean? Well, if everybody donated $1, that's $2 million. Now, I'm not all for doing this, but maybe we got to lobby that way and come up with $2 million to line up and grease the palms of these fishery people. Because they'll listen to us at $2 million versus just getting a couple $1,000 permits or whatever. I'm sure we can get some local officials to agree upon that. But let's look a little further why. So like Menhaden, they go out, they got to come back. inshore at least, and spawn and let their eggs come into the estuaries and everything. Well, if you start doing some more fact checking, the algae blooms and red tides that occur, maybe because our waters are warming up a little bit, but we're in the global warming itself. Coming out of an ice age, we're into a warming trend. We might be help accelerating. I'm not here for that argument. It's just that our oceans have warmed up about 2 degrees in the last 40 years. With that said, red tides moving a little further north, algae blooms, weak fish, right around 2000, I think it was. They had the big red tide in the Chesapeake. Well, 2000 was a bad year for being a weak fish because you were at the lowest population level ever. You slap on red tide, you kill just about everything off. Come forward, it's 2025. We are finally starting to see some 2 and 3 pound weak fish showing up. Well, it took that long for them to make a rebound for what it is, because we literally don't fish for them because it's one fish. So it's hardly worth fishing, right? But those red tides and the algae blooms, there's a lot of links. What are the links? That the chemicals we use, chem lawn, green lawn, and every other damn lawn to make your lawns green and such, in the spring, right? Because we're loading it up in the end of March, all of April, and the beginning of May to have a nice green lawn. Well, if it rains heavy enough, rather than sinking into the ground, it does what? Common sense. It runs off. Well, if it runs off into the water, that's a lot of chemical. And I'm finding out, marine biologists and just reading about it, that these chemicals actually make any fish that are there, they can make them infertile. Can make the eggs infertile. So even though you have a fertile fish there or whatever, her eggs aren't going to mean a freaking thing. Because we are polluting the waters in a different way. And this is lawn chemicals and such. People just don't understand. Well, you take it forward, and now you bring it up where I live. I live within a few minutes of the Manasquan River. We haven't had too many fish kills there, per se, as bunker. But we go up to Shark River, Shrewsbury, Navesink, that I used to fish all the time, and even sometimes in parts of Raritan Bay. You're like, in the spring, oh, there's been a fish kill. Well, it must have gotten cold. And they're shocked by the cold. Lack of oxygen, second one. Well, cold usually brings oxygen, so that's not right. And the fact that they huddle so tightly, they do use their oxygen if they're in a really tight school. The problem is, where these fish kills are usually happening, for instance, in Shark River, it's up beyond the boats, the Belmar fishing fleet, in the bay itself. When you come out of the big round belly of the bay, you come into like a turkey baster, right? It comes into a narrow choke, which is Shark River, going out to the inlet. Well, shit, if it's happening on an incoming tide that it's raining hard, you're getting too much fresh water, and then you have all that runoff of all those houses that you see with those big, lush lawns there, bright and green. You know they're treating them. And that gets washed in, and then everybody else around the outer perimeter, as everything washes downhill, because that's hills up there, wash down, you then circle them just like a pound net or something, right? They got nowhere to run. So now they get closer and closer and closer and closer. And you got chemical coming this way with fresh water, and then they use up their oxygen, and wipo. You got menhaden problems. You got death everywhere. And that's happened multiple times. And that's the main reason. It has nothing to do with the cold. Cold brings in oxygen. They can handle the cold. They are very fragile to brackish fresh or freshwater scene altogether. Okay? The commercial landings of the striped bass, I don't know what they are. I didn't Google them yet or anything down in Maryland and such or whatever, but they do some. So they take some breeding fish from time to time right as they're exiting or incoming into the bays. But shame on you, recreational fishermen. It's not the fish's fault. So handling with care is a big part of what we can do as a fishing group to make sure that they're there for the next time, and for like my son or my daughter that want to go out and fish. I see videos. Oh, it's too big. Throw them over. They beat them up. They throw them on the rocks if they're on a jetty. And, oh, it swam away. swam away for now. It's probably going to die later on. I don't know what the exact mortality rate is, and I'm not playing games and numbers like Fish and Game do and everything, or NOAA. There's got to be some percentage, 10%, 12%. I mean, I've seen it. I was part of Spring Lake Liveliners briefly for 1 year, okay? And I've saw multiple guys in that group, just like Asbury Park Liveliners. They gaffed multiple fish, not knowing if it's 34 inches at the time or whatever, and it's under. But I gaffed him in the stomach. He's going to live. He's going to be okay. I know we can't gaff them. People are still out there doing it. You know, netting them. Well, if you use the right net, like that rubberized netting, that will help keep the slime on the fish. That will help out. But just handling them better. Don't hold them with their mouth like this. You're going to dislocate their jaw, and then they have a tough time grabbing forage, and they will just die because they won't be able to eat. So keep all these kind of things in mind when you, the angler, go out that day. Be happy that, yes, it's an 18-incher, it's a 24-incher, it's a 40 or 50-pounder. We can't keep any of it. I know days when I first started out striper fishing, if I caught a dogfish or a skate, I thought I was doing good. And that's what the local people were saying, because there was no stripers. All right, moving on. Let's see what else I can tell you here. So one of the things that I wrote down that might sidetrack a couple people, whatever. I want to tell you, say hi to everybody that's here, and watching, or anybody that's going to watch coming forward. One of the things that is not being spoken about a lot is predation. Predation of what? Well, up to about 10 years ago, we had a pretty decent amount of bluefish still hanging around. We're not talking the cocktails to 3-4 pounders. We are talking about the 10 to 20 pounders bluefish that we used to have here from the late 80s into the 90s that used to be here until freaking Christmas, for God's sake. I still remember wearing my Santa hat, having my brother on Brick Beach catching these 18 to 22 pound bluefish on poppers, pencil poppers and such. Well, those days are gone. And, you know, some of the best videos you can watch or anything would be like North Carolina Outer Banks for giant tuna, wicked tuna fishing during last year. There's been a lack of bluefish down there. They talk about it in the one episode. Obviously, we're seeing a shortage up and down the Jersey coast. Otherwise, Grumpy's and Fisherman's Supply, Bogan's Basin and Peril, any of those bait and tackle stores would say, it's been a banner year. We're selling a load of medals. But they're not. Because we're only seeing a short spurt in the spring, and maybe a few that are going to follow out during this fall mullet run that's happening as we speak. With that said, bluefin don't give a crap when they're 500 to 1,000 pounds what they're eating. If they think they can get it in their mouth just like a bass, that's food for them, right? So one thing I had seen when I was up in Gloucester, Massachusetts, we had an abundance of stripers up there coming out of Cape Cod or Hudson, St. Lawrence waterways and everything. To see bluefin eating those things was a common occurrence. It's more common now because there's less bluefish. And it is more common occurrence all the way down here through the Jersey Shore. There's guys that were out there striper fishing, and you can't tell me wrong. We've seen a lot of big tuna. So we have 150 to 250 pounders within 2-4 miles of the beach, and at about 8-10 miles out, we are having what? Yes, those bigger 400 to 600 pounders, right? Well, if you drew a line from like Cape Cod Bay down to Delaware, look where some of those places line up. So they line up with the fact that that's the migration route of the striped bass. Yeah. No bluefish, they're setting themselves up on the striper migration. You've seen bluefin in the spring, really close up tight to the inlet sometimes, right? Well, need I mind you, when my dad was a char captain for 35 years up here, we used to fish in places that were 2, 3, 4, 5 miles right off the Manasquan, catching giant tuna, 150 to 500 pounders. Got pictures of them in my garage. Some people have seen the one that's hanging in there because they've been around. Yeah, they've been here, but they're here more than not now because there's a lack of bunker, adult bunker. There's a lack of bluefish. They got to look for some other kind of forage. So the only other kind of forage right now you can really fill in is the striped bass. There's still a decent amount of sea herring up to the north. There's sand eels around, but man, you got to eat buckets of sand eels to equal what a couple of adult bunker will do. And by the way, yes, one adult bunker. Picture a 5-gallon pail full of rainfish or spearing. Same calorie count. Which would you prefer, right? So that's why they kind of even turn to some clams from times, because bait is scarce. So they're clam and scalloping those tuna, right? But they are foraging on our striped bass. How many are they taking? I don't know. I think it's starting to get notable. It's no number there yet. Of course, there's some sharks around. More sharks now than probably in the last 5 years than there has been in the last 35 years that I've known. Especially inshore, thresher sharks. There's been a couple of great whites around, tiger shark, brown sharks, all capable of making your 20-pound bass just ahead. So the predation is there as well. And there's still, let's see what else I can do. Let's see, runoff. Oh, so one thing that as I mentioned a little bit a while ago, was the adult bunker. They have to go out, and they're out 20, 30 miles. And they'll come in to some extent. And they spawn 2 to 3 miles off coast and let the eggs come in. Well, the striped bass follow these menhaden all the way back and down, all the way down to the bays. But according to the marine biologists in Maryland, Delaware, and one in Cape May, they're noticing there's less numbers of stripers coming back into the bays. That's a problem. A, that means there's probably not enough forage. B, they're losing their way. Or C, the water's warming up a little bit, so they're not needing to go back to the bays and do what they normally do. So they're offshore a bit, which is a bit odd. But what the interesting thing is, we do have these big biomasses of fish, but apparently the biomass of Delaware is not hooking up with the biomass of the Chesapeake, and is not necessarily doing the biomass of Hudson fishery either in the New York Bight like they used to. So if you start looking at some of the fish that were posted in the spring and fall of the last few years, you're like, okay, everybody's catching stripers all over these places. You're going to notice there's some broken lines up by the pectoral fin. I've been hearing, oh, it's a hybrid striper. It's not a hybrid striper. It's an infertile striper from inbreeding. And inbreeding, of all the things that are on this table, inbreeding could be the number one thing that dooms the striped bass altogether. Especially if something doesn't get done drastically, unfortunately. The inbreeding is done at some point. I don't know. I'd say probably 1 out of every 5 fish that I'm catching has those broken lines, inbred fish. So again, if she was a female and she had 1 million eggs, okay, just think about this. If she had 1 million eggs and you had an infertile male next to her, she spews her eggs, he spews his milk, there's 1 million eggs gone. She's done for the year. Gone. Is there just one female usually in heat during that? No. So millions could be affected at any given time. And if she's an infertile female, well, you're not getting anything from her either. So, and part of this infertility, again, comes from maybe red tide and the algae blooms and everything and all the chemicals that are in our local estuaries. Even Barnegat Bay has come back with a population of striped bass. So some people are like, well, it's great in June and July. I saw some of those comments with Nick Honashevsky when he wrote something. I wrote something on his post. I get it. They could be some of our best waters. Just know that that's our local breeding population. And back when I was, before I knew what striper fishing was or anything, I was fortunate enough to meet a couple old people that their parents told me when they used to have, before the 37 bridge, there was nets back in the recession days, the 1900s. Netting, stripers, bluefish, weakfish, fluke, whatever could get in the nets. And that's what they ate, and that's what they used for currency and everything, because there was no money going around, no jobs and everything. And they probably, from what I'm seeing, have taken a tremendous striper fishery, weakfish fishery, bluefish, and it all disappeared because they did that for like 10, 12 years, I was told. And now we got stripers pretty much year-round in the bay, 37 bridge, top of the canal, in the canal, Manasquan Railroad Bridge and everything. And I can go out and I can get 15, 20 pounders. I can get 10 to 20 inchers. Same areas. So we do have a local breeding population. But if they're inbreeding to that point, or that degree, they're going to wipe themselves out because we already, by rules and regulations, not by us, but by Fish and Game, made us keep the breeders. And again, 28 to 31, we're still in those couple of inches where they allow us to keep a breeder fish. And that's a prime breeder. She might breed every 1 to 2 years. And then at like 34 to 36 or 37 inches, they breed one every 5 to 7 years. And then when you get beyond 40 inches, literally, once every 10 to 15 years. So that's why I say, like, those big fish, it's great that we see them, but they're not our breeding stock. And I've already proposed multiple papers to Fish and Game and everything saying, listen, back in the 70s, hey, you had, 18 to 28 inches, 5 fish or whatever it was. And then we used to have what's called the trophy tag, which is now a bonus tag. Trophy tag was a 50-inch fish or bigger, but they were so hard to catch. I guess you had to call them a bonus tag now because we didn't have a 50-inch fish. But now in the last 5 to 7 years, you got big fish all locally here that show up for the fall run and everything. And I think if you were a registered saltwater angler, we should be able to petition and say, listen, we want one tag for 50-inch fish or beyond, whether you're going to eat it, stuff it, or even release it, like I would still, just for somebody else to enjoy. That's up to you, but you should be entitled to at least that. A 52-incher, if that was the size limit, almost guarantees you a 50-pounder at that point. That was the status back then, right? 50 pounds. And allow us a couple of smaller fish or whatever. We would leave the middle fish alone if they just asked, but they don't. So maybe we have to push a little bit ourselves to get some rules and regulations. And that's why I said with a couple million voters that have to register, registrations for saltwater licenses and everything, you take $1 from everyone, I'm sure we can buy our way a little bit into the politics of this game and get things changed around. That the Omega boats can't come in for 3 years or something or whatever, and let those bait fisheries bounce back. And I know the striped bass fishery could bounce back even tenfold because I've seen it done. California, I've seen the way it had worked down in Florida. It could still work here. I wanted just to touch on that one thing. The temperature of the water have gone just a degree or two. In most cases, people 1 to 2 degrees doesn't mean much. But if you start at the equator, you will see the bleaching of the corals and everything, and fish have moved north or south of that line. It's too friggin' warm. All right, what is a couple of degrees? Well, you ask the next architect that's working on some ass building or your freaking house or whatever, how the hell did that happen? That was only off a couple of degrees. Didn't think it was much. But need I remind people, back in the day when we were fluking in late 70s and early 80s that we used to have a big portion of like 5 to 10 pound fluke come into between the Manasquan and Shark River inlets. Well, if you go out, okay, to basically the wintering grounds near the Hudson tip, 80 miles, and you do that 2 degree offline, all right, do you know where that puts you? Now, Sandy Hook to Long Island. And now, you fact finders and everything, take a look at all the fish that are being caught up there fluke-wise that are big fish or whatever. So I'm just saying that the migration patterns have also shifted maybe a little further north than what they should. And so maybe they're not mixing so much or whatever. But if the bait's not there to come back to, why the hell would you come back there? Just like you going out to a restaurant. It was there, okay, and now it's not there. Now you're looking elsewhere for your next meal or something or whatever. So is the fish. But in closing, there's still more stuff that I'm looking at or whatever. But like I said, fish kills, red tide, commercial fishery, the bait is the big thing, the menhaden, bunker boats. But if we can help out with the mortality of our own fishing, being a recreational fisherman, being a little more mindful, saying, thank you, Mr. Fish. Thank you. You bit my hook. I went down at 3 o'clock in the morning in the surf, and I actually caught one. Thank you. And place it in the water. Don't drop it on the beach sand, then kick it 25 feet into the water, saying, you know, he's fine. Because once his gill rakes get all full of that sand or whatever, he's as good as dead. People out in the boat again, holding him in the throat. Oh, look at that, look how long he is. He's 4 feet. That's great. But your hand went up into the gills and everything, eventually gonna die, 48 hours. And in a mouth like this in the lip, gonna dislocate the jaw. He won't be able to eat. He'll be dead in a couple of weeks. So you take him, you hold him underneath the chin, hold him. Belly will be laying here like this. Just hold him, take a picture. Thank you, Mr. Fish. Thank you. Head first into the water. And if they're small like this, and you can kind of hold them with almost one hand and guide them, then you give them like a little torpedo throw if you're within a few feet of the water or whatever, so they just kick off and go. And if she's a big old cow that you caught on the boat trolling or whatever, do the right thing. Boat and gear. Yes, you're going to get wet up to your elbows and everything, just holding onto the bottom lip and just swim her back and forth or whatever. And she'll give you a shake to let you know that she's ready to go, and let her go and say thank you. And I want to thank anybody and everybody that was watching. Hopefully this was some educational process to help out the painstaking view of, do we have a fall fishery? Do we close the spring fishery? Well, I, for one, know that the fall fishery is the better of the two fisheries, with the exception of Raritan Bay, which is the Hudson fishery, which is pretty good stock right now. But with that said, it's lightning fast in the spring here along the Jersey coast, the entire Jersey coast, from Cape May up to Monmouth Beach. It's in a blink and it's done. You want to close the spring? Close the freaking spring. I'd rather see it closed for a couple of years to everybody. Commercial, recreational, see the bait boat, the menhaden Omega boats be closed a minimum of 3 years. 5 years would be great. And you know what? Well, if we can come up with a couple $1 million every year or whatever, I think we can keep them closed for a couple of years, because they'll keep their mouths shut. And that's all I got to say for now. Until the next time on the water, let me just tell you, the fishing's been great locally here on the overnight. With the low pressure system close by and everything, the weather we've been having, gray skies, get out there and fish. And I thank you for watching.